Welcome ladies and gentlemen, Tactical Lich here, and we're back to the third game between General Eisenbart and Sufak on the BBB Season 1 Tournament Best of 5 series. Now, this game will be a Dark Elf mirror match, but don't worry, we are not focusing on the Cheese Runner Chariot duel. I decided to cast this game more because of the interesting lord choices on both sides, with General Eisenbart going for Marathi, a very popular lord in Game 2, but these days we don't see them as much, as we usually just see Malekith and Malice Darkblade. On the opposite side with Sufak, he's actually bringing Dreadlord with sword and shield. This one definitely is a niche lord choice since the Dark Elves were never big on their generic lords. Now for the army build itself, Marathi of course bringing her standard kit here, the Heart Render and the Dark Sword for the melee stat debuff, plus Enchanting Beauty for even further melee attack debuff. For spell kit here, we only see Soul Stealer for the damage dealing power and also self-healing capacity, though there's also the wand for some magical bombardment. For the rest of the army, we can see a master acting as the bodyguard of Marathi, providing that physical resistance with the guardian ability. And then a front line of Dread Spears mixed in with Bleak Swords. At the back here we have some Cold War Knights as well as a whole lot of mobility, putting a little bit more focus on the speed department here. General Eisenbart going for 2 Dark Riders with repeater crossbows and 2 regular Dark Riders with shields. And on the right hand side we have 3 Cheese Runner Chariots plus a single Feral Manticore in the skies. Now for the Red Dark Elf army, which is led by Sufak, we have a front line of Bleak Swords mixed in with Dread Spears as well, and then at the back, putting a bit more focus on the Missile Infantry, 3 Dark Shards, accompanied with a single Dread Spear. There's also a master on the front line here, and in the skies of course we have the Dreadlord with sword and shield. The Dreadlord does have an interesting toolkit in the form of multiple melee buffs. First of all, a Hydra Blade providing 50% of damage buff, and then also the Strength Through Spite providing additional 5 melee attack, which can counteract the melee debuffs from Marathi. As for mobility, 2 Cheese Runners on the left flank and 2 Dark Riders melee variant on the right flank. That's basically it for the army builds. Now let's get into the battle itself. Now this being a Dark Elf mirror and that both armies starting with their Scourge Runners on the same side of the battlefield, it is safe to say that the battle will begin with a bit of Cheese Runner skirmishing, trying to outshoot each other, but of course General Eisenbart with 3 Scourge Runners on his side will have an advantage over the 2 Scourge Runners of Sufak. But Sufak also has a Dark Rider unit hidden in the trees, and once they start pushing out and threatening the Scourge Runner chariots of General Eisenbart, they will be losing that advantage as they will need to start running away and possibly get dragged down in melee combat. On the left side though, General Eisenbart is gaining an advantage in terms of mobility here, charging down some of these red Dark Riders, as well as providing cover fire with these Dark Riders with repeater crossbows. They will be quickly routing off the Dark Riders of Sufak, while Marathi and Master busy pressuring the Dreadlords, keeping Sufak occupied and unable to micro other aspects of the army as he's trying to keep the Dreadlord safe and running him away from the dangers in the skies. Diving down onto the ground is definitely a good decision here, as the surrounding infantry, these Dread Spears, can tie down the enemy single entities and perhaps drag them down with their anti-large bonus. On the left side of Sufak's formation, these Dark Riders are now pressuring away the green Scourge Runners and also allowing the Dark Shards as well as the infantry to start pushing, working their way through the enemy infantry. General Eisenbart reinforcing his front lines with the Cold War Knights. They should do some nice damage against enemy infantry, but this is also a dangerous position, putting them very close to the enemy Dark Shards and now being showered by those armor-piercing crossbow missiles. The remaining Bleak Swords needs to push up, but unfortunately General Eisenbart's attention seems to be captured by the other side of the battlefield. His single entities are in a bit of a sticky situation, with Marathi trying to force path her way out of a blob of Dread Spears and the Master running away from a summoned Manticore from a Sorceress of Beast. His cavalry is doing well though, winning against the Dark Riders of Sufak, but his Manticore is routed by a combination of Dread Spears and the Dreadlord. Though through the persistent effort of the single entities, the Dreadlord did take some noticeable damage in melee engagements and from Soul Stealer. In contrast to General Eisenbart's character sniping attempt, Sufak is putting more emphasis onto the ordinary troops engagements. Having more infantry in the front line and the Dark Shard as well as the Master supporting, they were able to gain an advantage over General Eisenbart's infantry, as General Eisenbart's Scourge Runners have a limited effect against an infantry push. Also, Sufak will be redeploying the Dreadlord to the front line here, diving down onto some Bleak Swords. quickly triggering a terror rout with the Black Dragon, gaining an upper hand in the infantry engagement. General Eisenbart's Dread Spears are still fighting, but their leadership is getting dangerously low. With all the hostile units around, they will soon be overwhelmed. At the back, a regrouped Feral Manticore rampaging into some dark shards. The issue is that a lot of Dark Riders with their crossbows are tied down by the Dread Spears, as General Eisenbart issued a direct attacking order onto the Dread Lord, which pathed the Dark Riders straight into the interception of all the Dread Spears. His flying characters don't really suffer, but the ground cavalry are taking massive casualties from melee combat and being shot up by the Dark Shards. Though his characters did manage to catch up with the Dreadlord, who is rather slow on his dragon, and a Soul Stealer will be topping up the health of Marathi. At this point, Sufak has gained a rather huge lead in terms of army engagements. Most of his infantry is still intact, emerging victorious from the frontline fights, and the scourgerunners simply cannot clear them out by themselves. Sure, the Dreadlord might be low in HP, but he did contribute by routing a bunch of hostile infantry. While General Eisenbart is still focusing his effort to snipe out the Dreadlord, but this might be a little too late as most of the infantry support for his army is gone. Really, the only thing upholding the balance of power are the two single entities here. But these two characters are duelists and are not great against an overwhelming number of troops. Marathi will be diving down trying to snipe out the Dreadlord, but she is positioning herself way too close to the Dark Shards, getting point blank shot up by the Dark Shards. The Dark Riders are charging in to silence them out, but it might be perhaps too late. There are some cheese runners on the other side shooting at Marathi as well. Marathi, with her low armor, even with the additional physical resistance and missile resistance, it was just not enough to save her from all this focus fire of the scourgerunners and Dark Shards, and she'll be going down. Although the Master did manage to rout off the Dread Lord, but that also opened him up to the attacks from the Dread Spears, dragging him down. With the rest of the battlefield basically crumbling, there is little hope for the Dark Elves of General Eisenbart to win this engagement. Army losses is hit, and Sufak will be securing the second victory in the series. Reviewing the battle performances, General Eisenbart, despite his best effort to snipe out the Dread Lord, unfortunately he was not able to succeed, and instead Marathi and the Master suffered massive damage from a combination of missile attacks and anti-large spears. Sure, sniping out the Lord would be a great advantage, but unfortunately with the sheer health pool of the Black Dragon and the cover from the nearby supporting infantry, they were not able to successfully snipe him out in early game, and with all that attention going into microing the single entities, the infantry and the cavalry were a bit mismicroed, with the infantry being overwhelmed with a lack of support, the Cold One Knights being shot up by getting too close to the Dark Shard, and the Dark Riders, some of them were too busy chasing off the routed enemy cavalry and were unable to silence the Dark Shards instead. If the Dark Riders actually spent time in charging down the Dark Shards instead of chasing down routed enemies, then perhaps the frontline engagement will be a little bit more different. The Scourgerunner chariots didn't really do that much damage as they were just pressured by the enemy Dark Riders and being shot by the Scourgerunners of the opponent, while Sufak did a much better job in handling the frontline engagement, using a combined arm strategies with the cover fire of the Dark Shards and then using the terror from the Dreadlord on his dragon. They were able to quickly overwhelm the much more narrow front line of General Eisenbart, and as a result gaining an upper hand in the entire balance of power. Even with the Dreadlord routing in the end, they were still able to win with the sheer presence of the entire army. This concludes the third game of the series, with Sufak having a slight lead with 2 victories over General Eisenbart's 1 victory. We'll be continuing the series in a third video, so be sure to subscribe to the channel and keep an eye out for new uploads. That's it for today, thank you for watching and I'll see you in the next one. Tactical Lich, signing out.